I would like to welcome all the participants again in our session. Now we're going to have a panel discussion in the roundtable insights format. It's going to be moderated by Kerrie Finch. And I'm going to quickly introduce you to Kerrie. She is the founder of futurefactor, and she's also the founder of Amsterdam chapter of She Says and Cannes Lion representative for Netherlands. And Kerrie is going to introduce you to the rest of the panelists. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Kerrie. Kerrie, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our roundtable discussion today. It's a very virtual version and we're appropriately distanced. We will be focusing on how brands, businesses and individuals can build and integrate a fully comprehensive leadership position through social media. So I'm Kerrie Finch and I'm the founding partner of a communications company called futurefactor. And from our offices in Amsterdam, in London and in Los Angeles, we help our clients shape and sustain an influential leadership position. And we do this through communication strategy, through content and PR. So what happens is, brands cut through the noise and make impact with a clearly articulated brand voice. So I'm especially fascinated by this subject today. Because for many of us in business, harnessing the positive power of social media to strategically build a brand still remains a bit of an enigma. It's almost witchcraft. Often our online presence is muted. We're not maximizing our assets as our own brand ambassadors. However, some companies are nailing it big time. So is it time for you and your company to do the same? How do we join the dots between us as individuals and our businesses as brands? And how does social media help or hinder a brand identity? And why is a strong leadership position online so important anyway? I'm looking forward to hearing from our 5 experts who are with us today from the worlds of sonic branding, HR tech, coaching, and marketing communications. And they're here to help us understand why it's important to shine on social media and how best to go about it. So let me introduce you first up to Karunesh Prasad, who's based in Singapore. And Karunesh is an HR and change management professional. He's also an entrepreneur, a speaker, and author. And he's working in HR tech, change management, and the future of work. He's the founder of a number of change management consulting and HR tech startups. And prior to this, Karunesh spent 15 years with GE, working in India, Belgium, Singapore, and most recently, Houston. So welcome to you. And also welcome Sandra Schmoldt, who's based in Amsterdam. And she's the founder and coach at Equilido Transformation Support. I do hope I said that properly. She specializes in coaching professionals to navigate through disruption and to unleash their mental power. Prior to this, she worked for 25 years in communications and change roles in leading multinationals, including Novartis, Siemens, and also AkzoNobel. Welcome to Shea Harty, who's also based in Amsterdam. And Shea is a business coach and a mentor specialized in entrepreneurship. And she helps her clients overcome the fears and challenges that hold them back from being successful. She's also the managing director of the social enterprise Empowerment.work and the nonprofit Empowerment Amsterdam. And together they make career resources accessible to everybody. Welcome in Singapore, Imran Mohamed. And Imran is head of marketing for Rhemaworks International. And that's a human transformation company using psychometric, psychotherapy, and coaching tools. He's also the director of the Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce. And in his career, he spent a decade speaking to SMEs and business managers in more than 7 countries on digital marketing, social media, and digital transformation. And finally, we have Phoebe Ohayon, And welcome Phoebe. Phoebe's in Amsterdam, and she's a board member of Woozy Agency, and she's head of design at VoiceBranding.ai. And through her work, she helps major brands like PepsiCo and Central Bahia exploit the power of sound and speech for brand building and through sonic branding. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for making some time to be with us today. Let's kick off perhaps with you first, Sandra. Why do you think social media is so important in building a brand, whether it's for an individual or for a company? Why bother at all?
Why bother at all? Yeah, actually, social media helps to create a buzz, which is personal rather than, marketing driven. So if you say as a leader, you address your target groups, your audiences in a way which is really on eye level and helps them to identify with you as a person. And of course, also the message you're giving and the purpose that you're representing, it will add a lot of energy and also identification for those people, which makes a difference.
And Phoebe, from your perspective, what's your thinking on that?
I think Sandra is totally right. I think a lot of brands also need to think, of course, a bit about the audio. A lot of visual identities have been written and guidelines for writing stories and content and that kind of stuff. But sometimes the audible part of it lacks a bit. And I think that can strengthen even the strategy behind it.
So it's interesting that you talk about technology, audio, because what we're seeing during a crisis, any crisis, is rapid development and innovation. And this pandemic over the last 3 months has been no different. So what do you believe, or will be the impact of this on social media and on branding online?
Well, I think we still haven't really figured out or seen, I think it's more of a realization of what all the things we touch and read with this pandemic, instead of like using our hands and seeing it. And of course, with hygiene, touching devices and services and touching buttons, that becomes sort of, unhygienic in a way now.
Yeah.
So things like movement and audio come into place and speech come into place to solve these kind of things. So in terms of content and branding, I think, it's going to accelerate a bit for brands how to think about sound in a way for their devices and services, but also content-wise.
And Karunesh, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of what's coming out of a pandemic, in terms of innovation and tech developments that can help social media and brands to build a presence?
I think it's become much more easy than before to build a brand, simply because people are actually doing much more activity online. So that makes it easy for people to be able to access people across the world. So the fact that they don't need to travel and still be visible online is a big difference.
I agree.
Same thing for marketing, sales, and everybody else, what they're doing. So I think there's a huge difference, and this will have long-term impact on the way we do business.
So what does the future look like, do you think, over the next 3 to 5 years? What new developments will be visible in terms of integration? Of course, it's the video conferencing tools that we're all receiving and utilizing more and more. What else? What else can you predict?
I think the biggest change will be tolerance. Tolerance for being able to do business in a new way, for which organizations, they were not accepting it before. So work from home is not going to change completely, but there will be more tolerance towards that. Having said that, I think we are all human beings, we are all social animals. We will go back to some of the activities because that's how we like it. But the tolerance will give us more flexibility to do business otherwise also.
Okay. And Shea, what's your perspective on tolerance and how that we're all potentially creatures of habit? What does the world of social media and brand building as an individual, as a business, how far can we get? How much change can we expect from ourselves?
I think it's a lot to do with what Karunesh also just said, that the tolerance will be there. I also think that being more yourself, because everyone's home, everyone's online. If you look at us here now, we're in our own homes, in our own environments, and we're authentically ourselves. And I think that we're going to see even more of that. People making mistakes, not having a super polished video or having everything professionally done, but just being themselves online. And that's going to be more appreciated and more liked for customers.
So you believe the audiences are all out there, your fans, your consumers of a brand, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for authenticity. They're looking for some truth. It's about vulnerability, potentially.
Exactly. It's about vulnerability. It's also about not being afraid of what anyone's going to say when you make a mistake, and just letting that happen and accepting it. And now you go in a video and someone's dog jumps into the scene and they're like, okay, no one gets upset. No one tells you that you're unprofessional. No one says, oh, you need to do that over again. You're like, hey, life just happened.
The cat got in the way. Absolutely. Imran, if we can turn to you, I'd love to dig into this idea about vulnerability and authenticity a bit more. What role does that have to play for brands? Because brands don't like making mistakes. Brands are very insecure about being insecure. And how does that work for you? What's your impression and impact of that on how a brand can build?
Thanks, Kerrie, and hi, everyone. I think that's a great question. If you think about it, social media isn't any different to how we as human beings have communicated for millennium, right? And it's just driving human fundamental needs of communication, of feeling connected, of feeling love, of having your needs met, of feeling like you belong. So actually, at the end of the day, it's really just about how am I going to communicate with our human at the other end. So what people are realizing today is that they do not want to communicate with a corporation that is faceless, that is sterile, that does not show any human emotion, that does not show any human empathy. And I think that's how traditionally a lot of companies and brands have tried to hold a very clear and very strong fortress or front, right? So what you're starting to notice in the social media space is those that rapid fire, that tweet back, that have jokes, that sometimes even have mistakes and own up to it and say, oh, we did an oopsie. Those are the people that get the traction, the engagement, the communication, the retweets, the inquiries, right? So somehow that humanity does translate in many ways to that increased engagement, brand mind share that actually the corporations are looking for. I think the question will be, how is our customer behaving today? How are they looking for information today? How are they communicating today? So I don't think it's a one size fits all, but rather a fundamental question of, well, we used to communicate via pigeon carriers, and today it's social media, right? So fundamentally the human experience has not changed, but maybe the way that we communicate, the way the platforms that we're looking for information has.
Okay, that's a really great answer. And Sandra, maybe you could potentially build on that. I'm thinking about big corporations and leaders, the C-suite. What are some key challenges or indeed additional challenges in showing up on social media?
Yeah, actually the challenge here for leaders who are at the top of a big organization, sometimes 150,000 people, they really need to embrace the fact that they have to bridge that hierarchical gap and go down on eye level to communicate with their employees, for instance, which is really, they are critical in creating engagement and becoming ambassadors for their brand, and also in engaging with external audiences. And that can really be quite a challenge for leaders who have been a little bit distanced and, protected in their bubble. So certainly the change is massive currently. And it does take quite some courage also to be willing to step into that compassionate manner of communicating, and also being ready to get feedback, immediate feedback, and embrace that and take that into consideration. So the rules, namely in big corporations, are certainly really changing massively currently.
Anybody want to add anything to that? I'm fascinated, for example, by, in my business, how the best brands are able to inspire their employees to act as brand ambassadors. And how do you think this can be best achieved? Karunesh, maybe you can come in on that. You do a lot of work around HR, if I'm right in remembering.
Yeah. I think it's a very valid point you mentioned. Look at some of the CEOs today. I was looking at the videos from Sundar Pichai, and some of these guys are going out, not only within the organization, but also outside the organization, are speaking in the forums, which you wouldn't have heard 10 years back, the CEOs going out and speaking so much. They're visible. They're visible online. They're visible in different forums, and they're carrying the brand of the organization along with them. So that's the external branding. Internally, if you look at it, I think a lot of people look at the CEO or some of the big leaders, and they're constantly making judgments on their walking the talk. And the leaders need to therefore demonstrate that they're walking the talk or not. The only way they can do that is by being visible, being present, be on the blogging network, be on the videos. They're releasing videos continuously. Whether it's done by their communication team or themselves, this is their message. And I think that's where the biggest difference is. And then the social media is helping the organization to be able to share. If you are connected to folks from IBM, in the last 3 days, you would have seen a big chain of postings coming from IBM folks, and almost everybody shared that. And I was like, great job on the branding, because everybody shared the same thing. And I was just thinking that this is a great job for such a large organization to be sharing exactly the same message. So I think it makes a big difference if it is coordinated. And the employees, if they start to take pride in sharing what they're sharing, their connect becomes much higher.
Imran, I can see your head nodding. Did you have something to add to that?
I think this can happen on all levels. I think what you're seeing recently is that there are a lot more corporate initiatives, CSR initiatives. In fact, I'm hesitant to say CSR because that even is a bit of an outdated term today. I think there's a lot of community initiatives from various organizations where not just the top guys, but you have managers, leaders going out into the community doing mentorship work, volunteer work, community work, fundraising work, pro bono work, and they've actually made it a part of the culture. For example, where Google would say, hey, you can dedicate X% of your time to outside projects, or you can dedicate X% of your time or your resourcing into certain philanthropic activities. And I think those are some actual great ways that gets that brand leadership out as well.
There's one question from Irene, and she's got a question for Shea. How do you believe you can show your true self while we're all always trying to show ourselves as the best version of ourselves? How do you do that on social media? It's quite an interesting question. How do you walk that walk?
If, as an entrepreneur, people want to, when they're choosing to work with, and actually it's whether it's a small company or a large company, they want to know that that company understands the pain that they're in, or the struggle that they have, or the need that they need fixing, and that you know how to do it. So by sharing your connection, if you are an entrepreneur using social media and you're bridging that line between, I want to show you that I am my best, and I want to show you that I know what you need from me, and be authentic. It's about sharing those stories. It's storytelling. It always comes back to that as a brand, and sharing those stories about who you are. And when you're talking about the pain that you share, or the struggle you've been through, talk about it with the solution that you had in mind, how you came through it. because now you offer a service or a product or a need, you fix a need based on something that you went through, will connect with you.
I think that's a great answer, because in what I notice in my business is that people want to connect over shared experiences, and people want to learn. So it actually leads to a question here, another question, which is, what kind of content do you believe gets a lot of engagement among employees specifically? Sandra or Phoebe, maybe you want to pick up on that one.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Shea, because when leaders dare to share their personal stories, you know, they're used to having their key messages written by their ghostwriters, as Andy has recommended. But if they're not relating to their personal experience, and it's exactly that, to dare to be also vulnerable and go down to that eye level and identify, help your audience to identify with your story and see and feel clearly, oh, they know exactly what they're talking about. And another secret maybe actually for a leader or for an entrepreneur, also to ask inspiring questions. Not always have the answers, but be curious to learn more about the people you're interacting with on social media.
I think that curiosity is a great, a great word and a great tool, actually, in order to connect with your audiences out there, but also with your employees internally. Phoebe, what other tools are there, perhaps, that you can utilize as a brand or as an individual? What would you recommend? Where would you start?
As a millennial, I would say podcast, of course.
As a human, you can say podcast.
Yeah. No, but actually, podcasts make a great impression about me. And like scientific research also shows that listening to a voice only input has more empathic accuracy of the persona and the emotions that are expressed through that voice, instead of like having a voice with video. Sometimes that accuracy is dismissed because visual can influence how you perceive that person or what the intention is. So yeah, audio. Yeah, I think a combination of all of speaking to all senses possible is something that will be much more important in the future, instead of only doing the writing and only doing the video. But maybe smell is also a thing that becomes important in the future.
I think that's really poignant, actually. I think that's absolutely right, that our memories and our emotions are very much affected by all our senses. And of course, there's no reason why this won't be used, well, hopefully in a positive way in the future, to influence how we see and experience something. There's there's a question which has come in. It says for all the panelists, and perhaps we can just have a spot check around with everybody. The question is that social media has become very politicized. What responsibility do you believe brands have to engage in key issues? And how do they do that without seeming opportunistic? And I think what's going on in the world at the moment with hashtag Black Lives Matter is a key case in point. There are some brands who are struggling and are being honest about that. And there are some brands who are clearly jumping on a bandwagon, and they're not getting a good reception because none of us are stupid as an audience or as a consumer. So, the word opportunistic, I think, is really key. Who would like to jump in first? Maybe Imran or Karunesh?
Sure. I think what companies or brands can stand for is human life, human dignity, the human experience. I think if we are able to focus on that as a brand and not take specific sides, as a general rule of thumb, I think that's a great way to approach it. I think it really boils down back to the human empathy principle. And this will really tie into the previous questions about how do you speak vulnerably to your audience and how do you even engage the your team on the ground. And I think leaders can't do that in an ivory tower.
Right.
It has to be done. You know, a lot of times I will talk to the entrepreneur or the executive and I will ask a simple question, you know, when was the last time you had a direct conversation with your customer? And I think having that conversation and multiple times is what's really needed for the leader to have an understanding to really communicate that way. And I think without seeming opportunistic, I think sometimes, especially during a crisis like this, it may or may not be the right time to try to cash in on things. However, it also can be a great time to plant seeds for the future. This is very random, but I saw an advertising agency in Thailand. They lost a key account with Red Bull, and the account director was very upset by it, and he very nicely told a whole story about it on his personal media about, you know, I'm very upset that I lost the account, but I'm very happy because after looking at what they did, it's clear that they took all that money and resources and donated X thousand of masks to hospitals and did this and did that and donated this and donated that. And he was not particularly looking into cash in because there's no direct contract result from it. But I think he did a great job to tell the story, to connect with both his client for long-term business as well as people on the ground, and really plant seeds for the future there. So I think there are many opportunities to do such things.
Anybody else? How Shea?
Yeah, I think that brands have to I think brands should make a stand when the conversation is about something that is indisputable. Human rights. This is an indisputable thing. Everyone should have it. I think when there is a question of what is right or wrong, then yeah, don't pick a side, be empathetic to both sides. But when it's a general thing like human rights, Black Lives Matter, killing innocent children, things like that, let's pick a side. Let's not kill any children.
Let's hopefully be on the side of the righteous as well. The right rather than the righteous. Yeah.
I think when brands are doing that, not to be opportunistic, is don't ask for anything. Just say the thing that you want to say, be the good person, good brand rather, and don't look for it as an opportunity to now plug your, well, here we do this, or you know, we're giving 50% off to our product or service. Instead, just say we don't agree, or we agree with whatever action it is that you want to agree with, and leave it at that. Don't add on to connect it to your business. Just let it go. And I think that is a good way to not only let people see what your values are as a brand, but also let people see that you're empathetic to what's happening on, that you're not with blinders, and that it's not always about you making the sale, that there is something bigger than your company making profit.
Thank you for that. I think that's really relevant. It leads on to another question which has just come in. How do we avoid looking like we're jumping on a bandwagon? You know, because sometimes you're passionate, or a brand is passionate, or an individual, a brand ambassador is passionate. How do you prevent that from happening? You know, how do you be cautious and careful and correct about those optics? Sandra, perhaps you have a response to that?
I do, I think, because I think as long as you have a purpose in your company and you are clear about your values, there's certainly nothing wrong with coherently showing that on social media and you know, presenting messages that may reaffirm that purpose and those values without selling your cause, basically, or seeming or looking biased. So it's actually anything happening out there may always serve for you to look at your purpose and the straight line you want to follow, and then engage or not engage with what's out there. And you always may have the opportunity to engage your own people and engage people out there.
And another, perhaps this follows on from that. What do you do when you don't know what to talk about online? How do you decide what your point of view is? How do you make a stand? Are there tips that you folks would like to share? Karunesh is nodding. Shea, can we hear from you first?
I think when you're not sure what to talk about online, talk about what you do well. If you are an organization that offers coaching, for example, then talk about how you do your coaching. There are a couple of things you could do behind the scenes, like what's going on behind the scenes today, and also, or how do you do your coaching in whatever methodology, whatever step you use, or they have content called evergreen content, and that's something that you can Google. For those who don't know, very quickly, evergreen content is content that's always, it doesn't follow any trend. It's always on trend, basically. And that you can always share over and over and over again. It never goes out of style. And there are a lot of topics that fit in there.
Okay, great. That's a good tip. Karunesh, perhaps you have a response.
I was absorbing myself when Shea said that evergreen content. I was about to go and search the evergreen content right now.
Researching. We lost you for a moment.
But having said that, I think what she started with is the right thing. I mean, what we do well is the thing to share online. Simple. If we deviate from that and we start to force fit something, then we are not being authentic. And I've seen a lot of messaging happening on social media lately, which is all about COVID-19 and how people are trying to force fit that. Some of them go very well if it has been, crafted well. Some of them just doesn't fly. I mean, they are really very poor fit, and I hate to see those messages because I feel uncomfortable seeing that. So I'm assuming that that's what people would like to see or not see. If there's a coach, for example, like Shea said, and if you do that very well, and if you offer expertise on that, just do that. But don't become a health coach suddenly because everybody is talking about health. That's what I would say is my take here.
There's a couple of more questions I'd love to share with you. One from Franca. Would you say listening to your audience is as important as sharing what you do best? I think that's a great question. Phoebe, you're nodding along. What's your opinion of that?
I have also always this thing in my head. The brand is what the audience thinks of your brand instead of what you visualize your brand to be in all your guidelines and content strategy. So listening to your audience and knowing actually what they think of you as a company, as a brand, and your work environment, the whole culture and the values, blah, 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 blah. That is your brand. So listening is such a key. Yeah.
And who's doing it right? Who out there is listening? Who do you follow on social media? Who is an influence to you and the way you conduct your business?
Well, I did some kind of workshop for I can't say the name actually, but I did a specific workshop where they actually educate the whole team to be brand ambassadors and organize workshop from all over the team and explaining all their developments within the company and their products and their services and the environment and the impact and that kind of stuff. And I think those kinds of brands who educate internally their employees more, those are the brands that I follow, because they are the ambassadors eventually, and also the audience actually that represents the brand and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, Phoebe. Other folks, Sandra, perhaps you've got some examples of brands or individuals who are really doing it right, who you go to and utilize as a model of best practice.
Yeah, actually, if I should call out a name, Mind Valley is, for instance, really a platform which I find fascinating. I mean, you have leading coaches. They're offering all kinds of answers and interesting approaches to questions people will have and challenges they're confronted with. And that's actually where, going back to your last question, where I like to start by putting myself into the shoes of my audience and wondering about the questions they may have, the challenges they may be confronted with. And whenever I see that on social media, I'm sure to have a read and, you know, dig down deeper, because I find that very fascinating, to be compassionate with the people out there.
And Imran, Shea, do you have any best practice examples?
For myself, one entrepreneur I definitely look at is Elon Musk.
Controversial choice there.
Very controversial. He has a reputation for shooting his mouth sometimes, but you cannot deny that he's listening on the ground, all over the world, governments, the stock markets, researchers, and even, for example, again, I don't know why it goes back to Thailand, but there was this group of boys that was stuck in a cave in Thailand, and he said, okay, I'm going to send in a tech team to go and pick them up, right? So, and he even has all these little Twitter wars with influencers and YouTube creators. So for someone who does shoot his mouth off, I think he also knows what he's actually doing. So even when he's controversial, I think he knows exactly what he's doing as well. So so he definitely listens to the market and what people are saying, and I'm very sure that he communicates what he says based on what he listens.
And Karunesh or Shea, do you have examples of best practice or brands who you believe listen to their audiences?
You know, I'll give an example. Maybe you won't know the person, but I'm lately listening to a person who used to be a radio jockey in Singapore. Imran may know the person, but she has now turned into a speaking coach, voice coach, and she has been sharing a 1-minute video almost every second day. And I'm loving the content, because what she is doing, she has got a big following suddenly built up, and she is simply answering questions from people. And the mechanism of being able to ask, what would you like to hear about, and then sharing that from her knowledge, I think is working very well. But I'll not go back to a person or one individual. I would say there are hundreds and thousands of examples in each and every field where there are influencers who have become influencers only by listening and responding to people that follow them or the people who are talking on that topic. So we know about management field, but imagine there are people who are in the area of gardening, pet, yoga, pregnancy. There are so many
Could be anything.
Topics. Everything. These are the influencers and experts, and there are multiple examples of people who have become influencers only by sharing the same thing.
And thank you for that, everybody. Just a couple more questions before we wrap up, because time is slipping away from us. What are the big myths, do you believe? This is a question for everybody. What are the big myths about building a brand through social that actually we should just let go of and we should pop the balloon on? What do people try to do that just simply doesn't work and people should just stop already? There's always certain myths out there. Who would like to suggest what not to do? Let's put it that way.
There is one and I don't know if that everyone is still doing it, but where you have to show everything as if it's perfectly done already, that you haven't made any mistakes. And I think we are now at this point where we can let go of that myth, that you don't put anything out until the words you say, the picture you want, the video is
the airbrushing of your life.
I think we're past that now.
I want to be so past that. There's only so many filters a person can use in one lifetime. I think that's a brilliant point. Another one from perhaps Phoebe. What should people just let go of already? What not to do?
non-valuable content. Sometimes I see pictures and videos that it's just a waste of my timeline. Yeah, so be selective of the content, because then it's just like anticipating on the algorithm of all these platforms, you know. And yeah,
that's a great, be relevant.
Yeah.
And one more, Sandra?
Yeah, don't spread all the same content across all the media channels, all the social media channels you're playing. So just pick the one channel which feels most comfortable to you, which really speaks to your audience, and then tailor your message to that channel. And if you choose to use a different channel, tailor your message to that sphere, which you would see, for instance, on Facebook opposed to LinkedIn. So it's really a different story you tell, basically, and you wrap it differently. Otherwise you will, kind of.
That's great. That's absolutely. It's about tailored messaging. Karunesh and Imran, perhaps you can round us off with what not to do.
I actually agree very much with what they said. They pretty much took the points that I wanted to say. I think the idea that I need to be on all platforms and posting every day, I think that is something that many brands or entrepreneurs kill themselves with, sometimes before they even start. And I think what everyone has mentioned about really listening to the customer, choosing the platforms which are right, being very specific with the content that we're going to put out based on what we understand of the customer, based on our objectives. I think those would be the principles I would be looking at, so that you do a lot more with less.
That's a great one. Thank you. Do more with less. And Karunesh?
I'll just say one sentence, that's don't sell. Don't constantly keep on selling, because that's what people start to hate after some time. You can share content which is helpful to people, and I think that will be much better than selling.
Brilliant. So what we've got, the not to do's, is at least a place to start. If you're questioning how to start your brand journey on social media, pick a channel and start there. Be consistent. Do more with less. Be relevant. Don't post for the sake of it. Tailor your message to the channel and listen. Listen to your audience. Don't think, what do they need to know? Think, what do I need to learn from my audience? What do they want to hear? And don't sell. I think that's a great place to start. I think there's some great tips in there for anybody who's looking to build their brand voice, whether it's as an individual, as a brand ambassador, as a business, or as a product lead. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope we got through as many of the questions as we could. Karunesh, Phoebe, Sandra, Shea and Imran, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that our paths will actually cross in human form very, very soon. Thanks everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.